Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The rain fell in torrents across Seattle's empty streets, each drop echoing the tears Ethan Carter had shed for 40 consecutive days. 40 days since the phone call that shattered his world beyond repair. 40 days since Lily's laughter had filled their penthouse. 40 days since he'd last felt his unborn son Noah's kicks against his palm through Lily's swollen belly. Ethan pulled his charcoal wool coat tighter around his shoulders, though no amount of expensive fabric could warm the Arctic wasteland that had taken residence in his chest. The rain soaked through his Italian leather shoes, but he welcomed the discomfort. Physical pain was easier to bear than the emotional devastation that threatened to consume him with every breath. At 35, Ethan Carter commanded a tech empire. His company had revolutionized cloud computing, making him one of Seattle's youngest billionaires. He'd possessed everything: success, wealth, respect, and, most precious of all, Lily Beautiful. Compassionate Lily, with her honey, gold hair and champagne sparkle eyes. Lily, who'd convinced him love at first sight existed when she'd crashed into him at a coffee shop 3 years prior, her nursing textbooks scattering across the floor as she rushed to her pediatric rotation. But wealth meant nothing when you couldn't buy back the dead. Success felt hollow when there was no one to share it with. And love felt like a curse when it left you this empty. Ethan's feet carried him through the familiar maze of downtown streets he'd walked every night since the funeral. He couldn't bear to stay in their home, surrounded by baby furniture they'd assembled together, tiny clothes Lily had folded with such tenderness, the nursery painted soft yellow because they'd wanted to be surprised. Everything there whispered of what would never be. The rain intensified, hammering against the pavement like nature's own grief. Ethan welcomed it, tilting his face toward the sky and letting it wash over him. Maybe if he stood here long enough, the rain would dissolve him completely, and this unbearable aching would finally end. That's when he heard it. A sound so soft it almost blended with the rainfall, humming a gentle, melodic tune that seemed to wrap around his heart and squeeze. Ethan stopped walking, his breath catching as he turned toward the source. There, sheltered beneath the broken awning of a closed pharmacy, sat the most breathtaking woman he'd encountered since Lily. Her rich ebony skin seemed to glow despite the dim streetlight, raindrops catching the illumination like diamonds across her sculpted cheekbones. Her hair was secured in a simple bun, rebellious curls framing her face, and her eyes, Lord, her eyes held the deepest brown he'd ever witnessed, brimming with a pain he recognized from his own mirror. But it wasn't her beauty that stopped Ethan's heart. It was what she held in her arms, 2 babies, identical twins who appeared to be around 10 months old, wrapped in thin blankets that were doing little to keep them dry. The woman, who couldn't have been older than 28, was trying to shield them with her own body, her lips moving in what Ethan realized was a lullaby in Spanish. Her voice was honey and heartbreak combined, a sound that reached into his chest and grabbed hold of something he thought had died with Lily. "Por favor," she whispered to the few passers-by who hurried past without stopping, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Please, I just need enough for formula, my babies." Her English carried the musical cadence of her native language, each word carefully chosen, practiced. Ethan's feet moved before his mind could catch up. He found himself standing directly in front of her, close enough to see the exhaustion etched in every line of her face, the way her hands shook slightly as she held her children, close enough to see that she was trying so hard to be strong, even as her world was clearly falling apart. Their eyes met, and Ethan felt something shift in the universe. This woman's pain was different from his, born of abandonment rather than loss, of poverty rather than grief, but it was pain nonetheless. And in that moment, looking into those beautiful brown eyes, Ethan saw something he hadn't seen in 40 days. "Hope." "Ma'am," he said softly, crouching down so he was at her level, the rain soaking through his pants. But he didn't care. "What are their names?" She blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting this question from yet another stranger. "Diego and Lucas," she whispered, adjusting the blankets around the sleeping babies. "They're 10 months old." "They're beautiful," Ethan said, and meant it. The babies were gorgeous, with their mother's rich skin tone and perfectly formed features. One was slightly smaller than the other, but both looked healthy despite their circumstances. Where's their father? Pain flashed across the woman's face, and she looked away. Gone. When he found out they weren't his biological children, he left us 3 weeks ago. Took everything. I've been staying in shelters, but they're full now, and I can't. Her voice broke, and she pressed her lips together, clearly fighting tears. Ethan's heart shattered and reformed in the space of a heartbeat. Here was a woman who'd been abandoned, betrayed, left to care for 2 babies alone. Here was a mother's love, so fierce she'd sit in the rain and beg rather than let her children go hungry. Here was everything he'd lost and everything he'd dreamed of having with Lily. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Isabel," she whispered. "Isabel Morales." Isabel. Ethan tasted her name on his tongue, found it sweet. "I'm Ethan Carter." He watched recognition flicker in her eyes. His name was well known in Seattle, but she didn't change her posture, didn't suddenly become deferential or calculating. She just kept looking at him with those incredible eyes, waiting. Ethan's mind was racing, his heart pounding with an intensity he hadn't felt since before the accident. An insane idea was forming, born of grief and loneliness and something that felt suspiciously like fate. Lily had always believed in signs, in the universe putting people exactly where they needed to be. She'd said that about their own meeting, that they'd crashed into each other because they were meant to. Maybe this was Lily's sign. Maybe she'd sent him exactly what he needed most. "Isabel," Ethan said, his voice stronger now, filled with a certainty that surprised him. "I know this is going to sound crazy. I know you don't know me, but I lost my wife and unborn son 40 days ago, and I've been walking these streets every night since, dying a little more each time." Isabel's eyes widened, her grip tightening protectively on her babies. "I see you here, loving these boys so fiercely, protecting them even when you have nothing left to give, and I see—" Ethan's voice cracked. "I see what I was supposed to have, what I lost, what I still want more than anything in this world." The rain continued to fall around them, creating a curtain that seemed to separate them from the rest of the world. In this moment, there was only Ethan and Isabel and 2 sleeping babies who represented everything he dreamed of. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, Ethan continued, his words tumbling out faster now. "I have a home that's too big and too empty. I have love that has nowhere to go, and you have these beautiful children who deserve everything good in this world." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring knot, Lily's wedding ring, which he'd buried with her, but his own wedding band, simple platinum that had circled his finger for 2 years. Without overthinking it, without analyzing the madness of what he was about to do, Ethan Carter, billionaire CEO, rational businessman, grieving, widower, knelt in the rain in front of this beautiful stranger and her children. "Marry me," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Let me love you. Let me love them. Let me be the father they need and the husband you deserve. Let me give you everything you need, and let you give me a reason to live again." Isabel stared at him, her mouth slightly open, rain mixing with tears on her cheeks. One of the babies, Diego, or Lucas, Ethan couldn't tell which, stirred in her arms, making a soft sound that went straight to Ethan's heart. "You don't know me," Isabel whispered. But her voice held wonder rather than rejection. "I know enough," Ethan said firmly. "I know you'd rather sit in the rain than see your children go hungry. I know you sing to them in Spanish to keep them calm. I know you've been through hell, and you're still fighting. I know you have the strongest, most beautiful heart I've ever seen." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "And I know that 40 days ago, I wanted to die. But looking at you, at them, I remember what it feels like to want to live." Isabel's tears were falling freely now, her eyes searching his face. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you want this? Want us?" Ethan's own tears mixed with the rain. "Because God, or the universe, or Lily herself put you right here, right now, when I needed you most. Because those babies deserve a father who will love them unconditionally. And I have so much love with nowhere to go. Because maybe, just maybe, we can save each other." Thunder rumbled overhead, and one of the babies woke up, beginning to fuss. Isabel automatically began rocking him, her eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "I don't have anything to offer you," she said quietly. "No money, no family here, nothing but 2 babies who aren't even—" "They're perfect," Ethan interrupted fiercely. "You're perfect. You don't need to offer me anything except the chance to love you all." Isabel looked down at her sons, then back at Ethan, still kneeling in the rain with his ring in his outstretched hand. "Okay," she whispered. So softly Ethan almost didn't hear her over the rain. "Okay." "Yes," he said, stronger now, meeting his eyes with a courage that took his breath away. "Yes, Ethan Carter, I'll marry you." Ethan's heart exploded with joy, relief, and something that felt like redemption. He slipped his wedding ring onto Isabel's finger. It was too big, but it would do for now and then. He was standing, gathering her and the babies into his arms, all of them soaked and crying and laughing at the same time. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair, holding his new family close. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for giving me hope again." As Ethan helped Isabel to her feet, supporting her and the babies, he felt something shift inside his chest. The ice that had lived there for 40 days began to crack, and underneath, he felt the first warm flutter of what might eventually become happiness again. They walked through the rain together toward Ethan's car, toward his home, toward a future none of them could have imagined an hour ago. And if Ethan glanced up at the sky and whispered a quiet thank you to Lily, well, that was between him and the rain. Chapter 2. The Yes That Saved Two Souls. The elevator ascended to Ethan's penthouse in contemplative silence, broken only by the gentle breathing of sleeping infants and the quiet dripping of rainwater from their saturated clothes. Isabel pressed herself against the elevator's far wall, Diego and Lucas secure in her arms, struggling to process the evening's surreal turn. An hour earlier, she'd been homeless and desperate. Now she wore a stranger's wedding ring and rode toward the pinnacle of one of Seattle's most exclusive towers. Ethan stood opposite her, his storm-gray eyes never abandoning her face. Even drenched, he remained devastatingly handsome, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled when wet and a jawline speaking of determination and strength. Yet his eyes held her captive. They contained pain so profound it matched her own, and beneath that anguish, something resembling reverence as he observed her with her sons. "Are you having second thoughts?" Ethan asked softly as they reached the 40th floor. Isabel considered the question seriously. Was she insane for agreeing to marry a complete stranger? Probably. But something about Ethan Carter felt right in a way nothing had felt right since Victor had walked out 3 weeks ago, taking their car, their savings, and every shred of security she'd thought she had. "No," she said quietly, surprising herself with how certain she sounded. "Are you?" Ethan's smile was soft and genuine, transforming his entire face. "Not even for a second." The elevator opened directly into Ethan's penthouse, and Isabel's breath caught. She'd seen luxury apartments in movies, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Seattle's skyline, and the space was decorated in warm grays and blues that somehow managed to feel both expensive and welcoming. But what struck her most was how empty it felt. Despite the beautiful furniture and carefully chosen art, the space felt hollow, like a museum rather than a home. There were no personal touches, no photographs, no signs that anyone actually lived here. "Welcome home," Ethan said, his voice catching slightly on the last word. Home. When was the last time Isabel had felt like she had a real home? Her grandmother's tiny apartment in Los Angeles had been home until cancer took her when Isabel was 22. The apartment she'd shared with Victor had never felt like home. It had been his place that she was allowed to occupy. But something about the way Ethan said the word, like it was a gift he was offering her, made her chest tighten with emotion. Lucas stirred in her arms, beginning to fuss with the hunger cry she knew meant they needed to eat soon. Diego followed suit moments later, their internal clocks perfectly synchronized as always. "They're hungry," Isabel said, embarrassment coloring her voice. I don't have any formula left." "Of course," Ethan said immediately, springing into action. "What kind do they usually drink?" "I'll have someone bring it up right away." Isabel told him the brand, watching in amazement as Ethan made a phone call that would have cost her 3 hours of walking to various stores. Within 20 minutes, his building's concierge had delivered not just formula but diapers, baby food, bottles, and an entire selection of infant supplies. "I didn't know what size diapers," Ethan explained, looking almost shy, "so I got several different ones." Isabel stared at the pile of supplies that represented more money than she'd had in months. "Ethan, this is too much. I can't." "Yes, you can," he said firmly, moving closer to her. "This is what family does. We take care of each other. Family." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and possibility. "Here, let me help," Ethan said, reaching for Diego. "Which one is which?" "Diego has the small birthmark on his left temple," Isabel said, carefully transferring her son to Ethan's arms. "Lucas is slightly bigger and has the tiny scar on his chin from when he fell off the couch last month." Ethan cradled Diego with surprising natural ease, his large hands gentle and sure. "Hello, Diego," he said softly in Spanish, the pronunciation careful but correct. "Soy tu nuevo papá." Isabel's eyes filled with tears. "You speak Spanish?" "Some," Ethan admitted, beginning to rock Diego instinctively as the baby fussed. "I grew up in San Diego. My housekeeper, Carmen, taught me when I was young. I'm probably rusty." "It was perfect," Isabel whispered, watching this powerful man tenderly soothe her son. Something inside her chest cracked open, a feeling she thought was dead forever stirring to life. They settled into Ethan's spacious kitchen, working together to prepare bottles with an ease that felt like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Ethan held both babies while Isabel mixed the formula, his strong arms managing their weight effortlessly. When Diego began to cry harder, Ethan began humming the same lullaby Isabel had been singing in the rain. "How did you?" "My wife used to hum that tune," Ethan said quietly, his eyes growing distant. "Lily. She was a pediatric nurse. She said all babies responded to that particular melody, regardless of cultural background. Something about the rhythm matching a heartbeat in the womb." The mention of his deceased wife should have created awkwardness, but instead, Isabel felt a strange sense of connection to this woman she'd never met. Lily had loved this man, had been loved by him, and somehow her spirit felt present in this moment, blessing what was happening between them. "Tell me about her," Isabel said as they settled on Ethan's massive couch, each feeding a baby. Ethan's expression softened with love and grief intertwined. She was light, pure light. She became a nurse because she couldn't stand to see children suffer. "We met when she literally crashed into me at a coffee shop. She was running late for her shift and slammed into me so hard she knocked us both down." Isabel smiled, imagining the scene. "Love at first sight?" "The moment I looked into her eyes," Ethan confirmed. "I knew I was going to marry her before I even knew her name." She laughed when I told her that later, said I was either the most romantic man alive or completely insane. "Maybe both," Isabel suggested gently. Ethan's laugh was soft and sad. "She'd like you," he said, meeting Isabel's eyes. "She always said the strongest people were the ones who kept loving despite being hurt. She'd see that strength in you immediately." They sat in comfortable silence, feeding the babies as rain continued to streak the windows. Isabel found herself studying Ethan's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, the gentle way his lips curved when he looked at Diego. This man had just proposed to a complete stranger in the rain, and yet he seemed like the most genuine person she'd ever met. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "Really? You could have anyone. You could have helped me in a dozen different ways without marrying me. Why did you ask me to be your wife?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his attention seemingly focused on Lucas, who was drinking his bottle with determined concentration. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "Because when I looked at you tonight, I saw what I'd lost," he said quietly. "Not just Lily and Noah, but the dream of family, of coming home to people who love you, of having little voices calling you daddy and tiny hands reaching for you when they're scared." He paused, shifting Lucas to his shoulder to burp him with practiced ease that surprised Isabel. "But more than that," Ethan continued, "I saw what I was supposed to become. Lily and I, we talked about adopting someday. She always said love wasn't about biology. It was about choice. Every day, you choose to love someone. When I saw you protecting Diego and Lucas, willing to sacrifice everything for them, I knew you understood that kind of love." Isabel felt tears prick her eyes. "They're not even my biological children," she admitted quietly. I was Victor's girlfriend when his ex-girlfriend abandoned them on his doorstep. She'd been doing drugs while pregnant, and they were so small, so fragile. Victor wanted to give them up for adoption immediately, but I couldn't let them go. You became their mother the moment you chose them, Ethan said firmly. Biology doesn't make family, love does. Lucas had fallen asleep against Ethan's shoulder, and Diego was drowsy in Isabel's arms. Ethan stood carefully, moving to look out at the city lights. I haven't felt peace in 40 days, he said quietly. Haven't slept more than an hour at a time, haven't been able to eat or work or think about anything except the emptiness. But sitting here with you, with them, it's the first time since the accident that I feel like I can breathe. Isabel rose and moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. I know that feeling, she said softly. The emptiness. When Victor left, he took everything, not just our stuff, but my sense of worth. He told me I was nothing without him, that no one would ever want a woman with 2 babies that weren't even hers. Ethan turned to face her, his eyes blazing with protective fury. He was wrong. So completely, utterly wrong. Was he? Isabel asked, her voice small. Ethan, I was homeless 3 hours ago. I have no family, no education past high school, no skills except changing diapers and making minimum wage at whatever job will let me bring the boys. Stop. Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. He shifted Lucas to one arm and reached out to cup Isabel's face with his free hand. You're a mother. You're a protector. You're brave enough to sit in the rain and ask for help rather than give up. You're strong enough to love children who aren't biologically yours, as if they were your own heart walking around outside your body. You're beautiful, inside and out, and any man who can't see that is blind and doesn't deserve you. Isabel leaned into his touch, feeling tears spill over. When was the last time someone had spoken to her with such respect, such genuine admiration? I'm scared, she whispered. This is all so fast, so intense. What if we're making a huge mistake? Then we'll figure it out together, Ethan said simply. But Isabel, I need you to understand something. This isn't charity. This isn't me rescuing you. This is me being honest about what I need. I need a family. I need a reason to wake up in the morning. I need to love someone and be loved back. You're not taking anything from me. You're giving me everything I thought I'd lost forever. Diego chose that moment to make a soft baby sound in his sleep, and both Ethan and Isabel looked down at him with matching expressions of tenderness. We should put them to bed, Isabel said softly. I had Carmen set up the guest room, Ethan said. There are cribs, a changing table, everything you might need. But Isabel, I want you to know there are no expectations. We can take this as slow as you need, separate rooms, separate lives, if that's what you want while we figure this out. Isabel looked at this incredible man holding her son like he was precious cargo, offering her everything while asking for nothing in return, and felt something shift in her chest. Fear was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. Hope, gratitude, and the first stirrings of what might someday become love. What if I don't want separate lives? She asked quietly. Ethan's breath caught. What do you want? I want to try, Isabel said, her voice growing stronger. I want to see if we can build something real together, not just for them. She nodded toward the sleeping babies, but for us. Ethan's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. I'd like that too. They walked together toward the guest room, but at the doorway, Ethan paused. There's one more thing, he said quietly. Tomorrow, I want to make this official legal adoption papers for the boys, and if you're willing, a real wedding ceremony. Nothing big, just us and whoever you'd like there. But I want Diego and Lucas to have my name, my protection, legally, and I want you to be my wife in every way that matters. Isabel's heart hammered against her ribs. Ethan, think about it tonight, he said gently, but know that I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You 3 are my family now. That's not going to change, whether we have papers or not. But I want the world to know you belong with me. As they settled the babies in their cribs that Ethan had somehow arranged to have delivered and assembled in the few hours since his phone call, Isabel watched her new husband-to-be tuck blankets around tiny sleeping forms with infinite tenderness. Buenas noches, Ethan whispered, in careful Spanish, sweet dreams. And for the first time in weeks, Isabel believed they might be. Chapter 3. Building Our Kingdom. The morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows announced that Isabel hadn't been dreaming. The sound of a deep, masculine voice singing softly in Spanish from the kitchen confirmed it, occasionally stumbling over pronunciation, but radiating such warmth that her chest constricted with emotion. She'd slept more peacefully than she had in months, despite occupying an unfamiliar bed in unfamiliar surroundings, perhaps because of it. For the first time since Victor's abandonment, she'd felt secure enough to truly rest, knowing Diego and Lucas were protected, nourished, and warm in the adjacent room. Isabel pulled on the silk robe Ethan had left, folded at the foot of her bed. Everything about this place screamed luxury, from the Egyptian cotton sheets to the marble bathroom, and she padded barefoot toward the kitchen, following the sound of Ethan's voice and the incredible smell of coffee and something that might have been pancakes. She found him at the stove, dressed in jeans and a simple gray t-shirt that showed off the breadth of his shoulders, flipping pancakes with one hand while holding Diego with the other. Lucas sat in a high chair that definitely hadn't been there last night, contentedly gnawing on what looked like a teething biscuit. "Good morning," Ethan said, turning to smile at her, and Isabel's breath caught. In the morning light, he was even more handsome than he'd been in the rain, his dark hair slightly mussed, his eyes bright with something that looked like happiness. "I hope you don't mind that I got them up. They were starting to fuss, and I thought you could use the sleep." "You made breakfast," Isabel said, still trying to process the scene in front of her, and bought high chairs and apparently went shopping for baby food. "Carmen helped," Ethan admitted, indicating the older Latina woman who was setting the table with what appeared to be actual china. "Isabel, this is Carmen Lopez. She's been taking care of me for 10 years, and she's going to help us take care of the boys, too, if that's okay with you." Carmen approached with a warm smile, immediately wrapping Isabel in a motherly hug that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. "Mija," she said in accented English. "Ethan told me everything. These babies are beautiful, and you are exactly what this house has been missing." Isabel felt tears prick her eyes at the genuine warmth in Carmen's voice. "Thank you," she managed. "Carmen has 3 grown children and 6 grandchildren," Ethan explained, expertly transferring Diego to his other arm when the baby began to squirm. "She knows more about babies than both of us combined. And this one," Carmen said, gently poking Ethan's arm, "he is a natural. I watched him this morning with Los Niños, and I think, finally, this man remembers how to smile." Ethan's cheeks actually flushed slightly, and Isabel found it utterly charming. Here was one of the most powerful men in Seattle blushing because his housekeeper was praising his baby-handling skills. "They're easy to love," Ethan said simply, his eyes meeting Isabel's over Diego's head. Breakfast was surprisingly normal, considering they were eating off china that probably cost more than Isabel had made in a year. Ethan had somehow procured a selection of baby foods, and he and Isabel took turns feeding the twins, while Carmen kept their plates full of the fluffiest pancakes Isabel had ever tasted. "So," Ethan said as Lucas grabbed enthusiastically at his spoon, getting more sweet potato puree on his face than in his mouth, "I've cleared my schedule for today. If you're still willing, I'd like to go to the courthouse this morning, get the adoption papers started, and maybe—" He paused, suddenly looking uncertain, "maybe get married, if you haven't changed your mind in the daylight." Isabel studied his face, looking for any sign that he was having second thoughts. Instead, she saw hope mixed with vulnerability and something that looked almost like fear that she might say no. "I haven't changed my mind," she said quietly. "But Ethan, are you sure? Really sure? Because once we do this, once you adopt them, they're going to be your sons legally, forever. Even if things don't work out between us, they'll still be your responsibility." Ethan set down his coffee cup and reached across the table to take her hand. "Isabel, I want you to understand something. Last night, when I held Diego and Lucas, when I fed them and rocked them to sleep, I felt something I thought had died with Lily and Noah. I felt like a father not, like I was playing pretend or doing someone a favor, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be." He paused, his thumb stroking gently across her knuckles. "These boys aren't going to be my responsibility. They're going to be my sons. And you're not going to be a woman I married out of pity or grief. You're going to be my wife, the mother of my children, the love of my life, if you'll let me earn that place." Isabel's heart hammered against her ribs. "The love of your life, Ethan? We barely know each other." "I know enough," Ethan said firmly. "I know you sing to them in Spanish when they're scared. I know you'd rather go hungry than let them miss a meal. I know you have the most beautiful laugh I've ever heard. Yes, I heard you laugh when Lucas spit up on Carmen's apron. And I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up your entire face. That's not love," Isabel protested weakly. "That's attraction. Infatuation, maybe," Ethan agreed. "But it's also the foundation for love, isn't it? I loved Lily completely, desperately, with everything I had, and I know the difference between what I felt for her and what I'm starting to feel for you." "What's the difference?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, his eyes growing distant. "With Lily, love grew slowly. We were friends first, then more. It was comfortable, safe, built on shared dreams and common ground." His gaze refocused on Isabel's face. "With you, it's like lightning instant, powerful, overwhelming. I look at you, and I don't just want to love you. I need to. Like my heart recognized something my mind hasn't figured out yet." Isabel stared at him, this incredible man who was offering her everything she'd ever dreamed of and more. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Ethan said honestly. "Terrified. But I'm more scared of letting you walk away than I am of jumping into this with both feet." Diego chose that moment to reach for Ethan, making the soft baby sounds that meant he wanted attention. Ethan immediately scooped him up, and the baby settled against his chest with a contented sigh. "See," Ethan said softly, "he knows. Children always know." 3 hours later, Isabel found herself standing in Judge Margaret Thompson's chambers, wearing a simple but elegant dress that Carmen had somehow procured in exactly her size. Holding Lucas while Ethan held Diego, listening to a kind-faced woman in black robes ask if they understood the commitment they were making. "Mr. Carter," Judge Thompson said, "you understand that by adopting Diego and Lucas, you are accepting full legal and financial responsibility for their welfare until they reach the age of majority, regardless of what happens in your marriage to Miss Morales." "I understand, Your Honor," Ethan said firmly. "And I want that responsibility. These are my sons. And Miss Morales, you understand that you are giving Mr. Carter full parental rights, that he will legally be their father in every sense of the word?" "Yes, Your Honor," Isabel said, looking at Ethan holding Diego with such natural tenderness. "I can't think of anyone I'd rather have as their father." The paperwork seemed to take forever. But finally, Judge Thompson was smiling at them and saying the words that made it official. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Diego and Lucas are now legally your sons. Mrs. Carter, Isabel Carter." She tested the name silently and found she liked the sound of it. The wedding ceremony itself was brief but beautiful. Carmen and her husband, Javier, served as witnesses, both of them beaming as Ethan and Isabel exchanged vows they'd written that morning. "Isabel," Ethan said, his voice steady but his hands shaking slightly as he held hers, "I promise to love you and Diego and Lucas with everything I have. I promise to be the husband you deserve and the father they need. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life." "Ethan," Isabel replied, her voice thick with emotion, "I promise to trust you with my heart and my children's hearts. I promise to build a life with you based on love, not fear. I promise to be your partner in everything, for as long as you'll have me." When Judge Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan's kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise rather than passion. But when he pulled back and whispered, "I love you, Mrs. Carter," against her lips, Isabel felt something crack open in her chest. "I love you too," she whispered back, and was surprised to realize she meant it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of small domestic moments that felt like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Ethan insisting on stopping at a jewelry store to buy proper wedding rings, Carmen taking approximately 200 pictures of their family, the twins being remarkably well-behaved for babies who'd had their entire world turned upside down in 24 hours. That evening, after Diego and Lucas were asleep in their new nursery, Ethan had somehow had the guest room completely transformed while they were at the courthouse. Isabel found herself standing on the balcony, looking out at Seattle's skyline and trying to process everything that had happened. "Regrets?" Ethan asked softly, joining her at the railing. "No," Isabel said, surprised by how certain she sounded, just overwhelmed. "I think. Yesterday, I was homeless. Today, I'm married to a man I'd never met, with 2 sons who have a trust fund and college accounts, and a father who already loves them more than their biological parents ever did. About that," Ethan said carefully, "I hope you don't mind, but I set up accounts for them college funds, trust funds, for when they turn 25, emergency medical accounts. I want them to have every opportunity, every advantage I can give them." Isabel turned to look at him. "Why would I mind? You're securing their futures. Some people might think I was trying to buy their love. Or yours. Are you?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Maybe at first," he admitted. "Last night, in the rain, I think I would have done anything to convince you to say yes. But now it's not about buying anything. It's about providing for my family. My family." The word sent warmth spreading through Isabel's chest. "Ethan," she said softly, "can I ask you something personal? We're married now," he said with a small smile. "Everything's personal. What was Lily like, really like? I feel like I should know about the woman who had your heart first." Ethan's expression grew soft and sad. She was sunshine, literally. She had this way of making everyone around her feel happier, more hopeful. She saw the best in people, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. He paused, his eyes growing distant. "She would have loved you immediately, would have seen what I see, that you're strong and brave and beautiful, inside and out. She always said the measure of a person wasn't what they had, but what they were willing to give up for the people they loved. Do you think she'd approve of this? Of us?" Ethan was quiet for so long that Isabel began to worry she'd overstepped. But when he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I think she sent you to me," he said quietly. "I think she knew I was dying without her, and she couldn't bear to see me give up on love entirely, so she put you right where I'd find you, right when I needed you most." Isabel felt tears prick her eyes. "That's a beautiful thought." "It's more than a thought," Ethan said, turning to face her fully. "It's what I believe. And I think she'd want me to tell you that loving you doesn't diminish what I felt for her. It honors it, because she taught me that love multiplies when it's shared. It doesn't divide." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights twinkle below them. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "There's something else I want to talk to you about," he said. "I know we agreed to take things slow, but I need you to know I don't want separate bedrooms forever, not because I expect anything physical, but because I want to fall asleep next to my wife. I want to wake up with you in my arms. I want us to be a real family in every way." Isabel's heart began to race. "Ethan, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he said quickly. "I just want you to know that when you are ready, when you want more than just a marriage of convenience, I'll be here, waiting, hoping." Isabel looked at this incredible man who'd literally swept her off the streets and given her a fairy tale life, and felt desire stir in her belly for the first time since Victor had left. Ethan was handsome, yes, but more than that, he was kind, gentle. He looked at her like she was precious, like she was chosen rather than settled for. "What if I'm ready now?" she asked quietly. Ethan's breath caught. "Isabel, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she interrupted. "But Ethan, you said you needed a family." "So do I. I need a husband who loves me, not just tolerates me. I need someone who sees me as a partner, not a charity case. And I need," she paused, heat flooding her cheeks, "I need someone who wants me, not just as a mother for his children, but as a woman." Ethan stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I want you," he said, his voice rough with honesty. "God, Isabel, I want you so much it's driving me insane. But I want to do this right. I want to earn your love, your trust, your desire. I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything." "What if I told you that you've already earned it?" Isabel asked, reaching up to cup his face. "What if I told you that watching you with Diego and Lucas today made me fall a little bit in love with you? What if I said I want to share your bed tonight, not out of obligation, but because I want to start building something real with you?" Ethan's eyes darkened with desire and something deeper. Then I'd say I'm the luckiest man alive, he whispered, leaning down to rest his forehead against hers. And I'd ask if I could kiss my wife properly for the first time. Please. Isabel breathed. When Ethan's lips met hers, it was nothing like the chaste kiss at their wedding ceremony. This kiss was hungry, desperate, full of 40 days of grief transforming into hope. 28 years of feeling unwanted, melting into being cherished. Isabel pressed herself against him, feeling his hands tangle in her hair, hearing the soft groan he made when she opened her mouth for him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. I know it's too soon to say it, too soon to feel it, but I do. I love you, Isabel Carter. I love you too, she whispered back, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As Ethan swept her into his arms and carried her toward their bedroom, Isabel thought about fairy tales and second chances, and how sometimes the most beautiful love stories began in the darkest moments. Behind them, the city sparkled like stars, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled softly, as if the universe itself was applauding their new beginning. Chapter 4. When Passion Awakens. 3 months had elapsed since that transformative night in the rain, yet Isabel occasionally awakened expecting to find herself back in a shelter, cradling hungry babies while wondering about their next meal. Instead, she awakened in silk sheets, enveloped by Ethan's cologne and the steady rhythm of his breathing beside her. Their marriage had evolved into a rhythm that felt simultaneously surreal and perfectly natural. Ethan worked from home more frequently now, conducting video conferences while Diego and Lucas played at his feet. Isabel had enrolled in online business courses, Ethan's gentle suggestion when she'd expressed feeling purposeless and discovered a natural talent for marketing and social media strategy. But if she was honest, the most surprising part wasn't the luxury or the opportunities. It was how right it felt to be Ethan's wife, how natural it felt when he kissed her goodbye in the mornings, how her heart skipped when she heard his key in the door at night, how perfectly they fit together when they lay in bed talking about their days. They hadn't made love, yet they'd come close several times, passionate kisses that left them both breathless, gentle touches that made Isabel's skin burn with want, but something always held them back. Ethan was careful, almost reverent in his touches, as if he was afraid she might break, and Isabel, despite her growing desire, still carried the scars of Victor's cruel words about her worth. Tonight felt different, though. Outside, a storm raged, not unlike the one that had brought them together, and the twins were sleeping peacefully in their nursery. Ethan was in his study, working late on a deal that had been consuming his attention for weeks, and Isabel found herself drawn to the large windows that looked out over the city. Lightning illuminated the sky in brilliant flashes, and thunder rolled across the horizon like the gods themselves were applauding nature's power. There was something primal about storms, something that spoke to the deepest parts of the human soul. Tonight, watching the lightning dance across the sky, Isabel felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Beautiful, isn't it? Ethan's voice came from behind her, and she turned to find him standing in the doorway, his tie loosened and his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked tired but happy, his eyes soft as they took in the sight of her in the silk nightgown he'd bought for her. I love storms, Isabel said softly. Always have. My grandmother used to say they were the earth's way of cleaning itself, washing away everything that no longer served. Ethan moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Is that what happened to us? Did the storm wash away everything that came before? Maybe, Isabel said, leaning into his side when his arm came around her waist. Or maybe it washed us toward each other. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the storm rage outside their safe, warm haven. But Isabel was increasingly aware of Ethan's presence beside her, steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his fingers traced small circles on her hip, the masculine scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. Ethan, she said softly, not sure how to voice what she was feeling. He turned to look at her, and something in her expression must have given her away because his eyes darkened immediately. I want... She paused, heat flooding her cheeks. Even after 3 months of marriage, she still felt shy about expressing her desires. Victor had made her feel like her needs were wrong, shameful. What do you want, mi amor? Ethan asked, his voice gentle but rough around the edges. The endearment in Spanish made her heart flutter. Ethan had been practicing, wanting to be able to speak to their sons in both languages, but hearing him call her my love in her grandmother's tongue never failed to make her weak in the knees. You, she whispered, turning in his arms to face him fully. I want you, Ethan, all of you, tonight. Ethan's breath caught, his hands tightening on her waist. Isabel, are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be mine completely, and I'll be yours. I've been yours since the moment you knelt in the rain, she said, reaching up to cup his face. I've been waiting for you to claim me. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating their faces in stark relief, and something shifted in Ethan's expression. The careful restraint he'd been maintaining for months cracked, and Isabel saw hunger flare in his storm-gray eyes. I've been trying to be patient, he said, his voice rough with desire, trying to be a gentleman, but God, Isabel, I want you so much it's killing me. I lie next to you every night, wanting to touch you, to love you the way a husband should love his wife. Then stop being a gentleman, Isabel whispered, pressing herself against him. Stop being patient. Love me, Ethan. Make me yours. With a sound that was half groan, half prayer, Ethan's mouth crashed down on hers. This kiss was nothing like the gentle, careful touches they'd shared before. This was hungry, desperate, full of 3 months of pent-up desire and need. Isabel melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal fervor. Ethan's hands roamed her body with reverent hunger, mapping every curve through the silk of her nightgown. When his lips left hers to trail down her neck, Isabel gasped, her head falling back to give him better access. You're so beautiful, he murmured against her skin, his voice thick with emotion. So perfect. I can't believe you're mine. Show me, Isabel breathed, her hands working at the buttons of his shirt. Show me I'm yours. Ethan lifted her easily, carrying her to their bed as lightning continued to flash outside. He set her down gently, his eyes never leaving hers as he slowly, reverently slipped the straps of her nightgown from her shoulders. You're sure? He asked one more time, even as his hands shook with restraint. I've never been more sure of anything, Isabel said, helping him push the silk fabric down her body. When Ethan saw her fully for the first time, his expression was one of pure worship. Amorosa, he whispered in Spanish, absolutely beautiful. Ethan's touch was gentle but sure, as he explored every inch of her skin, as if he was memorizing her. Every kiss, every caress, was a declaration of love, a promise of forever. When he finally joined with her, their eyes locked. It felt like coming home. I love you, Ethan whispered against her lips as they moved together in perfect rhythm. I love you so much, Isabel. You saved me. She gasped, her hands tangling in his hair. You gave me everything. Thunder crashed overhead as they lost themselves in each other, 3 months of careful courtship exploding into passionate love. Ethan worshipped her body like she was sacred, and Isabel gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. When they finally collapsed together, breathless and sated, Ethan pulled her close against his chest, pressing kiss after kiss to her hair. No regrets? He asked softly. Only that we waited so long, Isabel said, tracing patterns on his chest with her fingertips. Ethan laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. I wanted to do this right, wanted you to be sure. I was sure the night you proposed in the rain, Isabel said, tilting her head to look at him. But Ethan, I need you to know something. What we just shared, it wasn't just physical for me. When you love me like that, when you touch me like I'm precious, it heals something in me that I thought was broken forever. Ethan's eyes grew bright with emotion. Victor really did a number on you, didn't he? Isabel nodded, not trusting her voice. Look at me, Ethan said gently, tilting her chin up. You are precious. You are worthy of love, of passion, of being worshipped. Any man who made you feel otherwise was a fool who didn't deserve you. How do you always know exactly what to say? Isabel asked, feeling tears prick her eyes. Because I love you, Ethan said simply, and when you love someone the way I love you, their happiness becomes your priority, their healing becomes your mission. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the storm rage outside while they basked in the warmth of their love. Finally, Isabel spoke again. Ethan, I want more children, she said quietly. I want to give you a biological child, a piece of us together. Ethan's arms tightened around her. Are you sure? Diego and Lucas are enough for me. More than enough. I know they are, Isabel said, pressing a kiss to his chest, but I want to see what a baby with your eyes and my stubbornness would look like. I want to give you the experience of feeling your child move in my belly, of being there for the birth. Isabel, Ethan's voice was thick with emotion. Nothing would make me happier, but only if you're sure, only if it's what you want too, not just what you think I want. I'm sure, she said firmly. I want to build a family with you, Ethan. I wanted all the sleepless nights, the chaos, the beautiful mess of it all. Ethan rolled them over so he was looking down at her, his expression serious. If we're going to do this, I want to do it right. I want you to stop taking birth control, but I also want you to see the best doctors, have the best prenatal care. I want to make sure you and any baby we have are completely healthy and safe. Okay, Isabel agreed, touched by his protective instincts. And I want to marry you again, Ethan said suddenly. What? Isabel laughed. We're already married. I want to marry you because I love you, not because we were both desperate and broken, Ethan explained. I want a real wedding, with your family there, with vows that come from love instead of grief. I want to choose you again, every day, for the rest of our lives. Isabel felt her heart swell with love for this incredible man. Yes, she whispered. Yes, to all of it, to the wedding, to the babies, to choosing each other every day. Ethan's kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and hope. Outside, the storm was beginning to calm, but inside their bedroom, a different kind of storm was just beginning, the beautiful, chaotic, passionate storm of a love that would last a lifetime. As they made love again, slower this time, savoring each touch and kiss, Isabel thought about how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been broken, alone, convinced she was unworthy of love. Now she was cherished, desired, completely and utterly loved by a man who saw her as his equal, his partner, his everything. I love you, Ethan Carter, she whispered as they moved together. And I love you, Isabel Carter, he replied, forever and always. Outside, the last of the thunder rolled away, leaving only the gentle sound of rain against the windows, the same rain that had brought them together, now blessing their union as they finally, truly became one. Chapter 5. A New Beginning. 6 months after their passionate, storm-lit night, Isabel stood before the bathroom mirror, staring at the pregnancy test, trembling in her hands. 2 distinct pink lines, unmistakable. She was carrying Ethan's child. Tears streamed down her face, tears of joy, gratitude, and a love so overwhelming it threatened to bring her to her knees. After everything she'd been through, after all the pain and abandonment, she was carrying the child of the man who'd saved her, who'd loved her back to life. Mommy? Diego's voice came from the doorway, his 2-year-old face scrunched with concern. He and Lucas had learned to walk, and were developing their vocabulary with Ethan's patient guidance, speaking both English and Spanish words. Why crying? Happy tears, Isabel assured him, kneeling down to gather both boys in her arms. Mommy has very happy tears. Papa make you happy? Lucas asked, his little hand patting her cheek. Papa makes me very happy, Isabel confirmed, her heart swelling. Both boys had started calling Ethan Papa naturally, without any prompting. Ethan's eyes had filled with tears the first time Diego had reached for him and said, Papa, up. And Isabel had fallen even deeper in love with her husband, watching him embrace his role as their father. Where Papa? Diego asked. Papa's working, Isabel said, standing up and taking their hands. But guess what? We're going to go surprise him. The boys cheered, always excited for any opportunity to visit Ethan's office. Isabel's hands shook as she got them dressed, her mind racing with how to tell Ethan the news. They'd been trying for a baby for 3 months now, and while Ethan never pressured her, she could see the hope in his eyes every month when her period arrived. Ethan's office was on the top floor of the Carter Industries building, and the boys knew the way by heart. They burst through the doors of his executive suite like tiny hurricanes, calling Papa Papa at the tops of their lungs. Ethan immediately abandoned the conference call he was on, his face lighting up as Diego and Lucas launched themselves at him. Miss Harrows, he said, catching them both in a bear hug. "What are you doing here?" "Mommy has happy tears," Lucas announced importantly. Ethan's eyes immediately found Isabel's over the boys' heads, concern flickering in their depths. "Happy tears?" "We need to talk," Isabel said, her voice barely steady, privately. Ethan's assistant, Rachel, immediately stepped forward. "I'll take the boys to the break room. There are cookies and juice boxes, and I think Diego wanted to see the new fish in the aquarium." "Fish!" both boys exclaimed, allowing themselves to be led away. As soon as they were alone, Ethan crossed to Isabel, his hands framing her face. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm perfect," Isabel said, reaching into her purse and pulling out the pregnancy test. "We're perfect." Ethan stared at the test for a long moment, his face cycling through disbelief, joy, and pure elation. Is this? We're having a baby," Isabel whispered, and Ethan's whoop of joy was so loud it probably carried to the floor below. He spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When he set her down, his kisses covered every inch of her face. "I love you," he said between kisses. "I love you so much. Are you happy? Are you scared? How are you feeling?" "I'm everything," Isabel laughed. "Happy, scared, excited, overwhelmed. But mostly I'm grateful. Grateful that our baby will have you as a father." Ethan dropped to his knees in front of her, pressing his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "This is your papa. I can't wait to meet you." Isabel's hands threaded through his hair as she watched this powerful man speak to their unborn child with such tenderness. "Ethan," she said, "I want to do something meaningful. I've been thinking about it for weeks, and now—" She paused, her hand moving to her stomach. "I want to start a foundation for women like I was single mothers, women who've been abandoned, who need help getting back on their feet." Ethan stood slowly, his expression serious. "Tell me more." "I want to call it the Lily and Noah Foundation," Isabel said, watching Ethan's face carefully. "In honor of your first wife and son. I want to create a place where women can get job training, childcare, housing assistance, a place where they can rebuild their lives with dignity." Ethan's breath caught, his eyes filling with tears. "Isabel." "Lily was a pediatric nurse," Isabel continued. "She helped children. I want to help their mothers. I want to create something beautiful from the pain, something that honors her memory while building our future." "You want to name it after Lily," Ethan said quietly. "I want to honor the woman who loved you first," Isabel said firmly. "The woman who taught you how to love, who made you the man I fell in love with. And I want to honor Noah, the son you'll always carry in your heart, alongside the children we'll raise together." Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "How did I get so lucky?" he whispered into her hair. "How did I find someone who understands that loving Lily doesn't mean loving you less?" "Because love multiplies," Isabel said, echoing words Ethan had said to her months ago. "Your love for Lily made you capable of loving me and Diego and Lucas and this baby. It all connects." "The Lily and Noah Foundation," Ethan said, testing the words. "I love it, and I want to fund it completely, whatever you need, whatever it takes." "It's not about the money," Isabel said, though she was grateful for his support. "It's about creating something lasting, something that helps women realize they're worthy of love and respect and second chances." 6 weeks later, Isabel stood in front of the renovated community center that would house the foundation, her hand resting on her growing belly. Morning sickness had been brutal, but Ethan had been incredible holding her hair back, bringing her crackers and ginger tea, working from home so he could take care of her and the boys. The grand opening was today, and Isabel was nervous. They'd invited local media, city officials, and dozens of women who'd already applied for the program. Diego and Lucas were with Carmen, dressed in tiny suits and bow ties, excited to see Mommy's work. "You ready for this?" Ethan asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I think so," Isabel said, leaning back against his chest. "It feels surreal. 6 months ago, I was the woman who needed this place. Now I'm running it. And you're going to change lives," Ethan said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "just like you changed mine." The ceremony was beautiful. Ethan spoke about Lily's legacy of helping others, his voice strong and clear as he honored his first wife's memory. Isabel spoke about second chances and the power of community, her passion evident in every word. But the moment that brought tears to everyone's eyes was when Diego and Lucas toddled up to the microphone. Ethan had been teaching them a speech, and they delivered it with 3-year-old seriousness. "This place helped mommies," Diego said carefully, "like our mommy. Papa says all mommies deserve love," Lucas added. The crowd erupted in applause, and Isabel felt her heart swell with pride. Her boys understood, even at their young age, that love came in many forms and that families were built on choice, not just biology. After the ceremony, as they toured the facility's job training rooms, a childcare center, counseling offices, even temporary housing, Isabel was overwhelmed by the positive response. Women approached her with tears in their eyes, thanking her for creating a place where they could rebuild their lives with dignity. "Mrs. Carter," one young mother said, holding a baby who couldn't have been more than 6 months old, "I read about the foundation online. My boyfriend left when he found out I was pregnant. I've been living in my car for 3 weeks." Isabel's heart broke and soared simultaneously. "What's your name?" "Sophia. Sofia Alvarez." "Sophia, you're going to be okay," Isabel said firmly, taking the young woman's hands. "We're going to help you find housing, get you enrolled in our job training program, and make sure your baby has everything she needs. You're not alone anymore." As they talked, Ethan appeared with Sophia's intake paperwork, already started, having anticipated Isabel's response. Watching him help this young mother, seeing the compassion in his eyes, Isabel fell in love with him all over again. That night, after the boys were asleep, Ethan and Isabel sat in their living room, her feet in his lap as he rubbed them gently. "Today was perfect," Isabel said, her hand resting on her belly where their baby was growing. "You were perfect," Ethan corrected. "Watching you with those women, seeing how you made them feel valued and hopeful. I've never been more proud to be your husband." "We make a good team," Isabel said softly. "The best team," Ethan agreed, his hand joining hers on her stomach. "How's our little one today?" "Active," Isabel laughed. "I think he or she enjoyed all the excitement." "Speaking of which," Ethan said, his expression growing serious, "I want to ask you something." "What?" "I want us to renew our vows," Ethan said. "I know we talked about it before, but now, with the baby coming, with the foundation launched, with everything we've built together, I want to marry you again, not because we're desperate and broken, but because we're whole and happy and choosing each other every day." Isabel's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want that too. I want your family there this time," Ethan continued. "I want Diego and Lucas to be part of the ceremony. I want to celebrate not just our love, but our family, our future." "When?" Isabel asked. "Before the baby comes," Ethan said. "I want to make these vows to you while you're carrying our child, while Diego and Lucas can understand what's happening. I want them to see their parents choosing love every single day." "I love you, Ethan Carter," Isabel said, leaning forward to kiss him softly. "I love you too, Isabel Carter," he replied, "more than I ever thought possible." As they sat together in the home they'd built, surrounded by pictures of their boys and plans for their foundation, with their baby growing safely inside her, Isabel marveled at how much her life had changed. She'd gone from begging in the rain to building an empire of love and hope, and the best part was, this was just the beginning. Chapter 6. The Storms We Weather. At 7 months pregnant, Isabel had never felt more radiant or more vulnerable. Her belly had curved into a perfect sphere that Ethan couldn't resist caressing, and Diego and Lucas, now almost 3 years old, delighted in conversing with their hermanita or hermanito each evening before bed. The Lily and Noah Foundation flourished, having assisted over 100 women in its initial 6 months, and their vow renewal was scheduled for the following month. Everything in their world was perfect, which Isabel had learned was usually when life decided to test you. The first test arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of Eleanor Carter, Ethan's mother, whom Isabel had met only once at their small courthouse wedding. Eleanor had made her disapproval clear then with pursed lips and cold handshakes, but she'd stayed away since until now. Isabel answered the door, expecting the grocery delivery. but instead found herself face to face with an elegantly dressed woman in her 60s. Her silver hair perfectly styled and her blue eyes, so like Ethan's, filled with disdain. "Mrs. Carter," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with false politeness. "We need to talk." "Eleanor," Isabel replied carefully, one hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. "Ethan's at the office. I can call him." "I'm not here to see my son," Eleanor interrupted, pushing past Isabel into the penthouse. "I'm here to see you." Diego and Lucas looked up from their toys, their nearly 3-year-old faces uncertain at the tension in the room. Isabel immediately moved to them, gathering them close. "Boys, why don't you go play in your room for a few minutes?" she suggested gently. "But Mommy," Diego started. "Go on, mi amor, I'll be right there." Once the boys were gone, Eleanor turned to face Isabel fully, her expression cold and calculating. "I'll get straight to the point. I know what you are." "Excuse me?" "A gold digger. A woman who trapped my grieving son into marriage by playing on his emotions with your sob story and those children." Isabel felt her temper flare but kept her voice level. "Those children are Ethan's sons. He adopted them legally and loves them completely. Those children," Eleanor spat, "are not Carter blood. Just like the bastard you're carrying isn't really my grandchild." The venom in Eleanor's voice made Isabel's hands shake with rage, but she forced herself to remain calm. "You need to leave now." "Not until I make you an offer," Eleanor said, reaching into her Hermes bag and pulling out a check. $5 million. "Take it, disappear with your children, and never contact Ethan again." Isabel stared at the check, her heart pounding with fury. "You think you can buy me?" "I think you're a smart woman who knows a good deal when she sees one," Eleanor replied. $5 million is more money than someone like you could ever hope to see otherwise." "Someone like me?" Isabel's voice was dangerously quiet. "A poor Hispanic woman with children from different fathers, trading on her looks and her fertility to trap a wealthy man," Eleanor said cruelly. "Did you really think Ethan would stay interested once the novelty wore off? Once you got fat and old and had given him a few babies to play with?" Each word was designed to cut, to tear at the insecurities Isabel had worked so hard to overcome. For a moment, she felt the old shame creeping in, Victor's voice echoing in Eleanor's cruel words. But then she remembered Ethan's hands on her belly that morning, whispering to their baby. She remembered him teaching Diego and Lucas to say, "I love you" in Spanish. She remembered him crying with joy when she'd told him about the pregnancy. "Get out," Isabel said, her voice still wrapped in silk. "Think about it," Eleanor pressed, leaving the check on the coffee table. "Ethan will tire of you eventually. Rich men always do. At least this way, you'll have something to show for it." "I said get out." Isabel's voice rose, and she heard Diego and Lucas's bedroom door open. "Mommy?" Lucas's small voice called. "You okay?" That's when Eleanor made her fatal mistake. She looked at the boys with undisguised disgust. "Those children will never be Carter's, no matter what papers say. They're not our blood. They don't belong in our world." Something primal and fierce rose in Isabel's chest. Nobody spoke about her children that way. "You want to know what I think of your offer?" Isabel asked. Picking up the check, Eleanor smiled smugly. "I knew you'd see reason." Isabel tore the check into pieces, letting the fragments flutter to the floor. "I think you're a sad, bitter woman who raised a son despite herself. Ethan is the man he is not because of you, but in spite of you. And if you ever speak about my children that way again, if you ever set foot in our home uninvited, I will make sure Ethan knows exactly what kind of person his mother really is." Eleanor's face flushed red. "How dare you?" "How dare I, what? Love your son? Be a good mother to children who needed one? Build a life based on respect and partnership instead of money and status?" Isabel stepped closer, her pregnant belly between them like a shield. "I'm not going anywhere, Eleanor. This is my home, these are my children, and Ethan is my husband. We're a family, and nothing you say or do will change that. Ethan will see through you eventually." Eleanor hissed. "Maybe," Isabel said calmly, "but until then, I'll love him with everything I have. I'll be the wife he deserves, and the mother his children need. And when our baby is born, I'll make sure he or she knows they have one grandmother who loves them unconditionally. Eleanor gathered her purse, her composure cracking. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Isabel said firmly, opening the door, because Ethan will choose us. He already has. After Eleanor left, Isabel sank onto the couch, shaking with adrenaline and pregnancy hormones. Diego and Lucas crept out of their room, immediately climbing onto her lap. "Mommy sad?" Diego asked, patting her face. "Just tired, baby," Isabel said, holding them close. "But I'm okay." When Ethan came home that evening, he found Isabel on the balcony, staring out at the city. He immediately sensed something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Isabel leaned into his warmth, drawing strength from his presence. "Your mother paid me a visit today." Ethan's arms tightened around her. What did she say? Isabel told him everything: the check, the cruel words about the children, the attempt to buy her off. With each detail, she felt Ethan's body grow tenser behind her. "She offered you $5 million to leave me?" Ethan's voice was deadly quiet. "She called Diego and Lucas bastards," Isabel said, and felt Ethan flinch. "She said they weren't Carter blood, that they didn't belong in our world." Ethan was silent for a long moment, his hands protective over her belly. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but implacable. "She done, Isabel. She crossed a line I told her never to cross. I warned her when we got married that you and the boys were my family now, and anyone who couldn't accept that wouldn't be part of our lives. She's your mother. She stopped being my mother the moment she tried to destroy my family," Ethan said firmly. "Blood doesn't give you the right to hurt the people I love." That night, Ethan called his mother and had a conversation that Isabel could hear through the closed office door, his voice rising and falling with controlled fury. When he emerged, his face was set in stone. "She's cut off," he said simply, "from the company, from the family trust, from our lives. I've made it clear that if she ever contacts you or the children again, I'll take legal action." "Ethan, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted, pulling her into his arms. "Isabel, you and Diego and Lucas and this baby are my everything, my priority, my choice. And I'll protect that choice with everything I have." 2 weeks later, Victor's sudden reappearance brought a different kind of storm. Isabel was at the foundation, meeting with new clients. When Rachel called to inform her, Victor was in the lobby, demanding to see her. Her blood ran cold. Victor had signed away all parental rights when he'd abandoned them 2 years earlier. But his sudden appearance couldn't mean anything good. "Send him up," Isabel said, her hand moving protectively to her belly. "But call Ethan. Tell him Victor's here." Victor looked older, thinner, with the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd been using drugs. He swaggered into her office like he owned it, his eyes taking in the expensive furnishings with obvious calculation. "Well, well," he said with a cruel smile, "look who landed on her feet. Or should I say on her back?" "What do you want, Victor?" Isabel asked, staying behind her desk. "What's mine?" he said simply. "Half of everything you got from your rich husband. I figure I'm owed for providing the kids that got you in the door." Isabel's blood boiled. "You signed away your rights to Diego and Lucas. You have no claim to anything." "See, that's where you're wrong," Victor said, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. "I kept copies of the unsigned papers. I may have signed away some rights, but as their biological connection, I still have claims, and I want compensation for my genetic contribution." "They're not your children," Isabel stood, fury giving her strength despite her pregnancy. "You walked away from them. You left us with nothing. And now you have everything," Victor sneered. 15 million should cover it, half of what your husband's worth. "Get out." "Make me," Victor said, moving closer, or better yet, tell your husband to pay up, unless he wants the world to know his perfect little wife was my piece on the side for 2 years. That's when Ethan's voice cut through the office like a blade. "The only thing the world's going to know," he said from the doorway, "is that you're about to be arrested for extortion and harassment." Victor spun around, and Isabel saw fear flicker in his eyes as he took in Ethan's imposing presence. Behind Ethan stood 2 security guards and what looked like a police officer. "Ethan," Isabel breathed in relief. "It's okay, mi amor," Ethan said, his eyes never leaving Victor. Mr. Gomez was just leaving. Permanently. This isn't over, Victor said, but his bravado was cracking. Yes, it is, Ethan replied calmly. Because those papers you're waving around? My lawyers have the filed originals. You signed away all rights 2 years ago and received financial compensation then. You have no legal claim to Diego and Lucas, and what you're attempting now is extortion. If you ever come near my wife or children again, you'll discover that I have resources and legal power you can't even imagine. As the police escorted Victor out, Ethan crossed to Isabel, gathering her in his arms. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? We're fine, Isabel said, though she was shaking. But Ethan, what if he tries? He won't, Ethan said firmly. I've already had restraining orders filed. He's done, Isabel. He can't hurt us anymore. That night, as they lay in bed with Diego and Lucas sleeping between them, both boys had insisted on staying close after the day's drama. Isabel marveled at her husband's strength. Thank you, she whispered in the darkness. For what? For protecting us, for choosing us over your mother, for making me feel safe. Ethan's hand found hers across their sleeping sons. Always, he said simply, in every storm, in every battle, I choose you. I choose us. Even when people try to tear us apart? Especially then, Ethan said, his voice fierce with love. Because what we have is worth fighting for. You're worth fighting for. As Isabel drifted off to sleep, surrounded by her family, she knew that whatever storms came next, they would weather them together. They were stronger than Eleanor's prejudice, stronger than Victor's greed, stronger than anything the world could throw at them, because they had something that couldn't be bought or broken. A love built on choice, strengthened by adversity, and multiplied by every new life they brought into their circle. Their kingdom would stand. Chapter 7. Life and Death and Love. At 32 weeks pregnant, Isabel felt as though she carried a small basketball that kicked relentlessly and rendered sleep impossible. Their daughter they'd recently discovered they were expecting a girl was active and robust, according to Dr. Rivera. Everything had progressed normally until the morning everything shifted. Isabel woke up to dampness between her legs and a cramping sensation that made her breath catch. At first, she thought it might be normal pregnancy discomfort. Dr. Rivera had warned her that the 3rd trimester would be uncomfortable, but when she tried to stand and felt liquid trickling down her thighs, panic set in. Ethan, she whispered, shaking his shoulder urgently. Ethan, wake up. He was instantly alert, sitting up and taking in her expression. What's wrong? I think my water broke, Isabel said, her voice tight with fear. But it's too early. She's not due for 8 more weeks. Ethan was out of bed and moving before Isabel finished speaking, grabbing his phone and clothes while helping her to the bathroom. Call Dr. Rivera, he instructed, already dialing 911. Tell her we're coming in. The next hour passed in a blur of ambulance, sirens, worried voices, and medical equipment. Diego and Lucas were quickly dropped off with Carmen, their sleepy faces confused as Ethan kissed them goodbye with promises that Mommy and the baby would be okay. But as they raced through Seattle traffic toward the hospital, Isabel wasn't sure anything would be okay ever again. It's too early, she kept repeating, one hand pressed to her belly where their daughter was unusually still. Ethan, it's too early. What if she can't breathe? What if she's not developed enough? She's going to be fine, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. She's a fighter, just like her mother. Dr. Rivera said her lungs were developing well at the last ultrasound. At the hospital, everything moved at lightning speed. Dr. Rivera met them at the emergency entrance, her usually calm demeanor urgent as she examined Isabel. Your membranes have definitely ruptured, she confirmed, and you're already dilating. We're going to have to deliver the baby today. Today, Isabel's voice was small and scared, but she's only 32 weeks. What if she's not ready? Babies born at 32 weeks have excellent survival rates, Dr. Rivera assured her, though her expression remained serious. Our NICU is one of the best in the country. But Isabel, I need to be honest with you, there are some complications. Ethan's hand tightened on Isabel's. What kind of complications? Your blood pressure is dangerously high, and we're seeing signs of preeclampsia. Combined with the premature rupture of membranes, we need to deliver the baby immediately. We're looking at an emergency C-section. The words hit Isabel like physical blows. Preeclampsia, emergency surgery, their tiny daughter fighting for life in an incubator, instead of safely in Isabel's womb for 2 more months. Is she going to be okay? Isabel asked, tears streaming down her face. We're going to do everything we can, doctor, Rivera said gently. But right now, I'm more worried about you. Preeclampsia can be life-threatening if we don't act quickly. The operating room was a blur of bright lights and masked faces. Ethan sat beside Isabel's head, still in his street clothes but wearing a surgical cap and mask, his eyes locked on hers as the anesthesia made everything fuzzy around the edges. I'm scared, Isabel whispered, her words slurring slightly. I'm right here, Ethan said, his voice strong despite the tears she could see in his eyes. I'm not going anywhere. You're the strongest woman I know, mi amor. You can do this. What if something happens to me? Isabel asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in her chest. What if I don't make it? Promise me you'll take care of Diego and Lucas. Promise me you'll tell our daughter about me. Stop, Ethan said firmly, leaning down so his forehead touched hers. You're going to be fine. You're going to hold our daughter and watch her grow up. You're going to see Diego and Lucas graduate from high school and college. You're going to grow old with me, Isabel Carter, because I'm not letting you go anywhere. The surgery seemed to take forever and no time at all. Isabel drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of pressure and movement, but disconnected from her body. She heard voices surgent, professional, worried, but couldn't make out the words. Then she heard it. A tiny, angry cry that made her heart stop and restart. She's breathing on her own, someone said, and Isabel felt Ethan's tears drop onto her face. Is she okay? Isabel managed to ask. She's perfect, Ethan sobbed, his voice breaking with relief and joy. 4 pounds, 2 ounces of pure perfection. She's breathing, crying, moving. She's okay, Isabel. Our little girl is okay. But even as relief flooded through her, Isabel felt something wrong. The voices around her were becoming more urgent, and Ethan's face above her was growing pale. What's happening? She tried to ask, but her voice wouldn't work properly. Isabel, stay with me, doctor. Rivera's voice cut through the fog. We're having some bleeding complications. I need you to stay awake for me. The next few hours were the longest of Ethan's life. He held their daughter, Olivia Faith Carter, named for Lily and Ethan's grandmother in the NICU, while Isabel fought for her life in surgery. Olivia was tiny but strong, her little fists waving as she breathed with the help of a ventilator. Her dark hair so much like Isabel's that Ethan's chest ached. Your mama is fighting for you, little one, he whispered to Olivia, his finger stroking her tiny hand through the incubator. She's the strongest person I know. She's going to be okay because she has to be. We all need her too much. Diego and Lucas arrived with Carmen, their 3-year-old faces solemn as they stared at their tiny sister through the glass. She's small, Diego observed. Very small, Lucas agreed, like baby bird. She's going to grow big and strong, Ethan told them, though his voice cracked with emotion, just like you did. Where, Mommy? Diego asked, and Ethan's heart shattered. Mommy is with the doctors, Ethan said carefully. She's sick right now, but they're taking very good care of her. Mommy going to be okay? Lucas asked, his little lip trembling. Yes, Ethan said firmly, because any other possibility was unthinkable. Mommy is going to be okay. Hours passed. Olivia's condition remained stable, her vital signs strong despite her early arrival, but Isabel remained in surgery, and with each passing hour, Ethan's fear grew. Finally, Dr. Rivera appeared, still in scrubs, her face exhausted but relieved. She's stable, she said, and Ethan's knees nearly buckled with relief. We had some complications with bleeding, but we've got it under control. She's lost a lot of blood, and she'll need time to recover, but she's going to be okay. Can I see her? Ethan asked. She's in recovery now. She'll be unconscious for several more hours, but you can sit with her. Isabel looked so small and pale in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and tubes. Ethan pulled a chair close and took her hand, careful of the IV lines. "I'm here," he whispered, bringing her hand to his lips. "Olivia is beautiful, Isabel. She looks just like you. She's in the NICU. But she's breathing on her own now. The doctors say she's doing amazingly well for 32 weeks. He talked to her for hours, telling her about Olivia's first cry, about how Diego and Lucas had named their sister Baby Bird, about how many people were praying for them both. When Isabel finally opened her eyes 18 hours later, the first word out of her mouth was, "Olivia." "She's perfect," Ethan said immediately, tears streaming down his face. 4 pounds, 2 ounces of absolute perfection. "Do you want to see her?" "Please," Isabel whispered. It took another day before Isabel was stable enough to be wheeled to the NICU. When she saw Olivia for the first time, tiny and perfect, with dark hair and Ethan's chinch broke down completely. "She's so small," Isabel sobbed, her hand pressed against the incubator. "But she's strong," Ethan said, his arm around Isabel's wheelchair. "Look at her oxygen levels. She's breathing better than some full-term babies. She's a fighter, just like her mother." "I was so scared," Isabel admitted. "When everything went wrong, when I felt myself slipping away, all I could think about was leaving you and the boys and never meeting her." "But you didn't," Ethan said firmly. "You fought, and you're here, and we're all together. That's what matters." They spent the next 6 weeks practically living at the hospital. Ethan moved his office to Olivia's NICU room, conducting meetings via video call, while Isabel pumped breast milk in Diego, and Lucas colored pictures for their sister's incubator. The day Olivia was finally strong enough to go home was one of the happiest of their lives. At 6 pounds and perfectly healthy, she looked enormous compared to the tiny baby they'd first met. "Welcome home, Baby Bird," Diego said solemnly, as they carried her into the penthouse. "Welcome home, Olivia," Lucas added. That night, as they sat together in the nursery, Isabel, in the rocking chair feeding Olivia while Ethan read bedtime stories to Diego, and Ethan marveled at how close they'd come to losing everything. "What are you thinking about?" Isabel asked softly. "How much I love you," Ethan said simply. "How grateful I am that you're both okay. How perfect our family is, even after everything that went wrong. Especially after everything that went wrong," Ethan said, "because it reminded me that nothing is guaranteed. Every day we have together is a gift." Olivia made a soft sound against Isabel's chest, and both parents looked down at her with expressions of pure love. "She's going to be spoiled rotten," Isabel said with a smile. "By her big brothers most of all," Ethan agreed, watching Diego gently pat Olivia's tiny hand. "Ethan, I want to have our vow renewal ceremony soon," Isabel said. "Being so close to losing each other, losing this, I want to celebrate what we have, while we have it." "Next month," Ethan agreed immediately, "as soon as Olivia's strong enough to be our flower girl. Our flower girl will be 3 months old." Isabel laughed. "Then Diego and Lucas can carry her down the aisle," Ethan said, "our whole family participating in our new beginning." As they tucked their children into bed that night, Olivia in her crib between Diego and Lucas's toddler beds, all 3 of them safe and healthy, Isabel felt a peace she'd never experienced before. They'd been tested by Eleanor's cruelty, Victor's greed, and life's unexpected dangers, but they'd emerged stronger, more united, more grateful for the love they shared. "I love you, Ethan Carter," she whispered as they finally settled into their own bed. "I love you too, Isabel Carter," he replied, pulling her close. "Forever and always. No matter what storms come." Outside, Seattle twinkled in the darkness, but inside their home, everything was warm and safe and perfect. Their family was complete, their love was tested and proven, and their future stretched ahead of them, bright with possibility. Chapter 8. Renewed Vows. The memorial garden where Ethan had first knelt in the rain had been transformed into something magical. 3 years after their desperate meeting, Ethan had purchased the entire city block and created a beautiful sanctuary where fountains danced and flowers bloomed year-round. Today, it would serve as the altar for their vow renewal, a celebration of love chosen rather than love born from desperation. Isabel stood in the bridal suite of the nearby boutique hotel, staring at herself in the mirror. The flowing ivory dress she wore was nothing like the simple courthouse outfit from their first ceremony. This gown was a masterpiece, elegant, sophisticated, and perfectly tailored to her post-pregnancy figure. But it was the expression on her face that took her breath away. She looked happy, truly, completely happy. "Mommy pretty," Olivia said from her high chair, clapping her tiny hands. At 8 months old, their daughter was a perfect blend of both parents' Ethan's determined chin and Isabel's warm brown eyes, with dark curls that refused to be tamed. "Thank you, mi amor," Isabel said, adjusting the delicate tiara that held her veil. It had been Lily's, passed down from Ethan's grandmother. When Ethan had offered it to her, Isabel had cried not from sadness, but from the profound honor of wearing something that connected her to the woman who had loved Ethan first. Diego and Lucas burst through the door, handsome in their tiny tuxedos, their hair slicked back and their bow ties slightly askew. At 4 years old, they were Ethan's sons in every way that mattered. "Mommy!" Diego shouted. "Papa says it's time." "Papa is crying," Lucas added importantly. "Happy tears like you." Isabel's heart swelled. These boys, now 4 years old, were Ethan's sons in every way that mattered. They spoke both English and Spanish fluently. They had Ethan's protection and love, and they'd grown into confident, loving children who called her mommy and him papa without any confusion about their origins. "Are you ready to walk your sister down the aisle?" Isabel asked as Carmen adjusted the flower girl basket Olivia would be carried in. The boys would push the decorated stroller, while Olivia sat inside it like the tiniest queen. "See, Mommy," they chorused together. The music began out the traditional wedding march, but the Spanish lullaby Isabel had been humming that first night in the rain. Ethan had arranged for a mariachi band, honoring Isabel's heritage in a way Victor never had, in a way that made her feel celebrated rather than hidden. As the doors opened and Isabel saw the gathering of people who had become their family, her eyes filled with tears. Her cousin Carmen from Los Angeles, who had flown in with her children. Sofia Alvarez, the young mother from the foundation's opening day, now a successful medical assistant with her own apartment. Dozens of women whose lives had been touched by the Lily and Noah Foundation. Rachel from Ethan's office, who had become like a sister. And there, in the front row, Dr. Rivera, who had saved both Isabel and Olivia's lives. But it was Ethan who stole her breath completely. He stood at the fountain where they'd first met, wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair slightly mussed by the Seattle breeze. When he saw her, his face crumpled with emotion, and he pressed his hand to his heart as if the sight of her was too much to bear. Diego and Lucas walked ahead of her, carefully pushing Olivia's decorated stroller between them. Their daughter gurgled happily, reaching for the flower petals they scattered, completely unaware that she was the star of the show. When Isabel reached Ethan, he was openly weeping. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, taking her hands. "So perfect." "So are you," she whispered back, and meant it. Ethan had grown even more handsome over the years, confidence and fatherhood adding depth to his features, but it was the way he looked at her like she was his entire world that made him beautiful. The officiant, a family friend who had known Ethan since childhood, smiled at the assembled crowd. "We gather today not to witness the beginning of Ethan and Isabel's love story, but to celebrate its continuation," he began. "3 years ago, in the rain, just steps from where we stand, 2 broken hearts found each other and chose to heal together. Today, they choose each other again, not from desperation, but from joy." Ethan had written his vows this time, and when he pulled out the folded paper, his hands shook. "Isabel," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "3 years ago, I was a dead man walking. I had lost everything that gave my life meaning, and I was drowning in grief. Then I found you, or you found me, and you didn't just save my life, you gave me a life worth living." He paused, looking at Diego and Lucas, who were standing nearby with serious expressions. "You gave me sons who call me Papa and mean it. You gave me a daughter who looks at me like I hung the moon. You gave me a purpose through our foundation, a home that's filled with laughter and a love that's deeper than anything I thought possible." Isabel was crying now, not caring about her makeup. "But most importantly," Ethan continued, "you taught me that love doesn't diminish when it's shared, it multiplies. My love for Lily didn't make me love you less, it made me capable of loving you more." Our love for Diego and Lucas didn't make us love Olivia less. It expanded our capacity for love. He looked directly into her eyes. So today, I choose you again, not because I need you, but because I want you. Not because you saved me, but because you complete me. I choose you, Isabel Carter, every day for the rest of my life. When it was Isabel's turn, she didn't need notes. The words came straight from her heart. Ethan, 3 years ago, you told me you saw what you'd lost when you looked at me. But I need you to know you also saw what I'd always been. You saw a mother's love, a woman's strength, a heart capable of healing. You didn't rescue me from poverty, you revealed the treasure I always was. She reached out to touch his face, smiling through her tears. You took 2 abandoned boys and made them princes. You loved them so completely that they never question their worth. You gave me a daughter who will grow up knowing she's cherished. You built a foundation that has helped hundreds of women realize their own worth. Her voice grew stronger. Today, I choose you not because you have money or status, but because you have the biggest heart I've ever known. I choose you because you make me laugh, because you sing off-key Spanish lullabies to our children, because you still hold my hand when we walk down the street. She looked at their children, then back at him. I choose our beautiful, chaotic, perfect family. I choose this love that started in the rain and has only grown stronger through every storm. When they exchanged new rings, these ones inscribed with Amor Multiplica, love multiplies, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. You may kiss your wife, the officiant said with a smile. Again, Ethan's kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and joy. When they broke apart, Diego and Lucas cheered, Olivia clapped her tiny hands, and the mariachi band launched into a jubilant celebration song. The reception was held in the hotel's rooftop garden, overlooking the city where their love story had begun. As Ethan spun Isabel around the dance floor, both of them laughing like teenagers, she marveled at how far they'd come. Do you ever miss it? Ethan asked as they swayed to a slow song. The simplicity of before, when it was just survival? Never, Isabel said firmly. I don't miss being hungry or scared or wondering if my children would have a future. I don't miss feeling worthless or unwanted. But, she admitted, I'm grateful for it. Because it taught me to recognize real love when I found it. It taught me that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. It taught me that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. Ethan spun her again, and when she came back to his arms, Olivia was reaching for them from Carmen's arms nearby. I think someone wants to dance with her parents, Ethan said, taking Olivia and settling her between them as they continued to sway. Diego and Lucas joined them on the dance floor, wrapping their arms around Ethan and Isabel's legs, and suddenly they were all dancing together, a tangle of arms and laughter and pure joy. This is perfect, Isabel whispered, looking around at their extended family celebrating with them. This is just the beginning, Ethan replied, kissing her temple. Wait until you see what the next chapter holds. As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, Ethan pulled Isabel aside. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Ethan, you've already given me everything. Not everything, he said, pulling out a set of keys. These are to the house. What house? The house I bought for us, for our family, with a yard for the children to play in, a workshop where Diego can build things, a music room where Lucas can practice piano, a nursery for Olivia that gets morning sunlight. Isabel stared at the keys. You bought us a house? I bought us a home, Ethan corrected. Somewhere we can grow old together. Where our children can bring their children. Where love can multiply for generations. Show me, Isabel whispered. The house was everything Ethan had promised, and Moria sprawling colonial with gardens and space for children to run. But what made Isabel cry was the small plaque by the front door. The Carter Family Home, where love multiplies. Welcome home, Mrs. Carter, Ethan said, carrying her over the threshold while Diego, Lucas, and Olivia followed. Welcome home, Mr. Carter, she replied, and knew that wherever Ethan was, wherever their children were, that would always be home. Chapter 9. Full Circle. 5 years had elapsed since their vow renewal, and the Carter family home buzzed with the beautiful chaos of a house filled with love. Diego and Lucas, now 9 years old, had grown into handsome young boys who still called Ethan Papa with deep affection. They raced through the halls with Olivia, who at 5 was determined to keep pace with her big brothers despite being half their size. The sound of children's laughter mingled with the clatter of morning breakfast preparations as Isabel attempted to ready everyone for the day. "Diego, your backpack," she called, flipping pancakes while simultaneously braiding Olivia's unruly curls. "Lucas, did you finish your math homework?" "Sí, Mommy." Lucas called back, already dressed in his school uniform and looking remarkably like Ethan when he concentrated. "And yes, I have my science project," Diego added, appearing in the kitchen with a carefully constructed volcano that he and Ethan had worked on together the night before. Ethan emerged from his study, looking polished and professional in his business suit, but his hair was slightly mussed from Olivia's insistence on helping him get ready. "Crisis at the foundation?" Isabel asked, noting the early morning phone call he just finished. "The good kind," Ethan said. "Stealing a kiss and a piece of bacon. The Seattle Times wants to do a feature story on our 5-year impact. Apparently, we've helped over 1,000 women now." Isabel paused in her pancake flipping, the magnitude of that number hitting her. 1,000 women, 1,000 families changed, 1,000 lives given hope because of something that had started with her own desperation in the rain. 1,000, she repeated softly. 1,000, Ethan confirmed, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "All because my brave wife decided that surviving wasn't enough. She wanted to help others thrive." Their morning routine was interrupted by the doorbell, and Ethan frowned. "Expecting anyone?" "The journalist isn't supposed to come until this afternoon," Isabel said, wiping her hands on her apron. Ethan went to answer the door, and Isabel heard his sharp intake of breath. A moment later, he returned to the kitchen with a young woman who couldn't have been more than 22, holding a baby who looked about 6 months old. She was thin, exhausted, and had the hollow-eyed look Isabel remembered all too well. "Mrs. Carter," the young woman said hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you at home, but I couldn't wait for an appointment. I'm Clara Hernandez, and I need help." Isabel's heart clenched with recognition not of the girl, but of the situation. This was her 8 years ago, desperate and alone with a child, who depended on her. "Of course," Isabel said immediately, guiding Clara to the kitchen table. "Sit down. Have you eaten? When did you last have a proper meal?" "Yesterday, I think," Clara said, her voice small. Ethan was already moving, fixing a plate of pancakes and pouring orange juice, while Diego and Lucas watched with the solemn understanding of children who had been taught that helping others was simply what their family did. "Tell me what's happening," Isabel said gently, sitting across from Clara while Olivia climbed into her lap, instinctively sensing that quiet was needed. "My boyfriend kicked me out 3 days ago," Clara said, her voice cracking. "He said the baby was ruining his life, that he never wanted to be tied down. I've been sleeping in my car, but it broke down yesterday, and I spent my last $20 on formula." The story was heartbreakingly familiar. Isabel felt Ethan's hand on her shoulder, offering silent support as memories of her own darkest days threatened to overwhelm her. "What about family?" Isabel asked. "My parents disowned me when I got pregnant," Clara said, tears starting to fall. "They said I was a disgrace to the family name. I have nowhere to go, and Amelia." She looked down at her daughter with such fierce love that Isabel's chest tightened. "She deserves better than sleeping in a car." "Yes, she does," Isabel said firmly. "And so do you." Ethan stepped forward. "Clara, I'm Ethan Carter. My wife and I run the Lily and Noah Foundation. Have you heard of it?" Clara's eyes widened. But I thought, I came here because someone at the shelter said you might help, but I never imagined that you'd answer the door yourselves." Isabel smiled. "We've never forgotten where we came from. In fact, this is exactly where I was 8 years ago, desperate, alone with 2 babies, and no hope. But now I do," Isabel said. "But 8 years ago, I was sitting in the rain outside a pharmacy, begging for formula money. When Ethan found me, or when I found him, we've never been entirely sure which." Ethan squeezed Isabel's shoulder. "What my wife is trying to say is that we understand exactly what you're going through, and we're going to help you, I can't pay you back, Clara said quickly. I don't have any money, no job, no. Stop, Isabel interrupted gently. The foundation isn't about payback. It's about paying it forward. Someone helped me when I needed it most. And now we help others. Diego chose that moment to speak up. Are you going to live with us? He asked Clara with 9-year-old directness. Diego, Ethan said gently. But Clara was already shaking her head. Oh no, I couldn't impose. Actually, Isabel said, an idea forming, why not? We have the guest house in the back that's been empty since Carmen's daughter moved out. It has a kitchen, a nursery, everything you and Amelia need. Isabel, Ethan said quietly, are you sure? I'm sure, Isabel said, looking at her husband. Remember what you told me that first night, that sometimes the universe puts people exactly where they need to be? Ethan's expression softened with understanding. I remember. Clara, Isabel said, turning back to the young woman, I want to offer you something, not just housing, though that's part of it. I want to offer you a chance to rebuild your life with dignity. A job at the foundation. Helping other women who are where you are now. A safe place for Amelia to grow up. A family who understands what you've been through. Clara stared at her, tears streaming down her face. Why? Why would you do this for a stranger? Because you're not a stranger, Isabel said simply. You're me, 8 years ago. And if someone hadn't helped me, if someone hadn't seen my worth when I couldn't see it myself, I wouldn't be here. None of this would exist. Olivia, who had been listening with the serious attention only small children possess, suddenly reached toward Clara's baby. Baby, she said solemnly. Her name is Amelia, Clara said, shifting the baby so Olivia could see her better. Mia, Olivia pronounced carefully, then looked at Isabel. Mommy, Mia stay? If Clara wants to stay, then yes, Mia can stay, Isabel said. I want to stay, Clara whispered, but I don't understand how this is real. This doesn't happen in real life. It does in our life, Ethan said, sitting down at the table. Clara, 8 years ago, my wife and I found each other on the worst night of our lives. We were both broken, both desperate, but together, we built something beautiful. We've made it our mission to help other people build beautiful things from their broken pieces. The foundation has helped over 1,000 women, Lucas added proudly. Papa told us this morning. And you could be the 1,001st, Diego said with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted that problems had solutions. Clara looked around the table at this family who had welcomed her without question, who spoke of miracles like they were everyday occurrences, who saw her potential when she couldn't see past her desperation. Okay, she whispered. Yes. Thank you. Yes. The rest of the morning was a whirlwind of activity. Ethan called the foundation to arrange temporary childcare for Amelia. Isabel gathered supplies for the guest house, and Diego and Lucas appointed themselves as Clara's official tour guides. As they settled Clara and Amelia into the guest house, a charming cottage with a garden view and everything a small family could need, Isabel found herself standing in the doorway, watching Clara put Amelia down for a nap. It's going to be okay, she said softly. How can you be so sure? Clara asked. Because I was you, Isabel said simply, and look how my story turned out. That afternoon, the journalist from the Seattle Times arrived to interview them about the foundation's impact. As she listened to Ethan and Isabel talk about their work, she seemed particularly interested in their personal story. So, you met when you were homeless? The journalist asked Isabel. I was homeless. Ethan was grieving. We were both lost in different ways, Isabel explained. But we found each other exactly when we needed to. And now you've helped over 1,000 women? We've been part of over 1,000 women helping themselves, Ethan corrected. We just provide the resources and support. They do the real work. Speaking of which, the journalist said, I understand you have a new resident. Isabel glanced at Ethan, who nodded. They'd agreed to be open about Clara's story, with her permission. As an example of the foundation's work, Clara Hernandez and her daughter, Amelia, Isabel confirmed. Clara will be joining our staff. Helping other women navigate the same challenges she's facing. Isn't that unusual, hiring someone who's currently receiving your services? Not at all, Ethan said. Some of our best counselors and advocates are women who've been through our program. They understand the challenges in a way that no amount of education can teach. It's like the story coming full circle, the journalist observed. Exactly, Isabel said, thinking about Clara in the guest house, about Amelia sleeping safely, about all the women who would benefit from Clara's experience and compassion. Love multiplies when it's shared. Help multiplies when it's given freely. And hope multiplies when people who've been hopeless can offer hope to others. That evening, as the Carter family gathered for dinner, now including Clara and Amelia, Isabel looked around the table and marveled at how much their family had grown not just in size, but in purpose. "Clara," Olivia said, seriously, "tomorrow, you can help us feed the ducks in the pond. And I'll show you where the best climbing trees are," Diego added. "And Lucas can play piano for Mia," Isabel suggested. She seemed to like music. "I'd like that," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "All of it." Later, after the children were in bed and Clara had settled into the guest house, Ethan and Isabel sat on their back porch, watching the lights twinkle in the cottage where their newest family member was starting fresh. "8 years ago," Ethan said softly. "Did you ever imagine this?" "Never," Isabel admitted. "I thought my story was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And now? Now I know my story was just beginning," Isabel said, leaning into Ethan's embrace. "Every ending is really just a new beginning in disguise." "I love you, Isabel Carter," Ethan said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you too, Ethan Carter," she replied. "And I love this life we've built together." In the guest house, a light burned late into the night as Clara held her daughter and whispered promises of a better tomorrow, the same promises Isabel had once made to Diego and Lucas, the same promises that had become beautiful realities through love, persistence, and the belief that everyone deserved a second chance at happiness. Chapter 10. Forever is just the beginning. 10 years after that life-altering night in the rain, Ethan Carter stood in his backyard, observing his wife teach their 7 children how to dance to Spanish music in their garden. The Seattle sunshine filtered through the oak trees they'd planted together, casting golden light over a scene that continued to steal his breath. Diego and Lucas, now 14, had grown into handsome teenagers who towered over their parents but still called Ethan Papa with the same affection they'd had as toddlers. They moved with teenage awkwardness to the mariachi music, making their younger siblings giggle as they attempted the steps Isabel demonstrated with natural grace. Olivia, now 10, danced with the confidence of a girl who'd never doubted her place in the world. Her dark curls bounced as she spun, teaching 5-year-old Clara named for the young woman who'd become like a daughter to them the steps their abuela had taught Isabel years ago. Samuel, 8, and the twins, Amelia and Sophia, 6, completed their rainbow family. Each child had come to them through different circumstances, some through adoption, some through birth, all through love. The foundation had connected them with children who needed families, and somehow their house had expanded to accommodate every heart that needed healing. "Papa!" Olivia called out, noticing Ethan watching from the porch. "Come dance with us." "Si, Papa," little Sophia shouted, her speech still adorable with the lisp she was slowly outgrowing. "Mommy says, you need practice." Ethan laughed, setting down his coffee and joining the impromptu dance party. When he reached for Isabel, spinning her into his arms, she looked exactly as beautiful as she had that first night, maybe more so. Because now her beauty was enhanced by the confidence of a woman who knew she was deeply loved. "Having fun without me?" Ethan asked, dipping her dramatically as their children cheered. "Never," Isabel said, breathless with laughter. "We were waiting for the guest of honor." "Guest of honor?" "Today marks exactly 10 years, Isabel said, her eyes sparkling with the secret she'd been keeping all morning. 10 years since you knelt in the rain and asked me to marry you. 10 years since you said yes to a crazy stranger," Ethan replied, pulling her close as their children continued dancing around them. "The best yes I ever said," Isabel murmured, then raised her voice so all the children could hear. "Actually, I have an announcement to make." The music stopped as 7 children turned expectant faces toward their parents. Diego and Lucas exchanged knowing looks at 14. They'd learned to recognize the signs. "What is it, Mommy?" Olivia asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. Isabel looked at Ethan, her smile radiant. Papa and I are going to have another baby. The eruption of joy was immediate and overwhelming. Olivia shrieked with delight. The twins jumped up and down, clapping. Samuel whooped, and even Diego and Lucas grinned widely. But it was little Clara who asked the question that made Ethan's heart swell. "Another baby to love?" she asked seriously. "Another baby to love," Isabel confirmed, and Clara nodded solemnly, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan swept Isabel off her feet, spinning her around as their children cheered. "How long have you known?" he asked against her ear. 3 days, she admitted. "I wanted to wait until today to tell you. Our anniversary deserved good news." "The best news," Ethan said, setting her down and cupping her face in his hands. "Number 8. Are we crazy?" "Completely," Isabel laughed, "but it's the best kind of crazy." That evening, after the younger children were in bed and Diego and Lucas were doing homework, Ethan and Isabel sat in their garden with Clara Hernandez, now Clara Carter, having been officially adopted 2 years earlier, and her daughter, Amelia, who was 6 and best friends with their Sophia. "I still can't believe this is my life," Clara said, watching Amelia play with building blocks on the porch. "5 years ago, I was sleeping in my car. Now I'm the director of the Foundation's youth outreach program. I have a master's degree in social work, and Amelia has 6 siblings who adore her. 7 siblings soon," Isabel corrected with a smile. 7, Clara repeated, wonderingly. "And you know what the craziest part is? I'm not even surprised anymore. This family just grows, like love has its own gravitational pull." Ethan reached for Isabel's hand, thinking about how right Clara was. Their family had indeed grown through some invisible force that seemed to draw hurting people into their circle and heal them through love. "Speaking of growing," Clara continued, "I have some news too. Remember Samuel's birth mother, May Lynn, the one who's been writing to him?" "Of course," Ethan said. Samuel had come to them at age 3 through the Foundation when his teenage mother couldn't care for him, but they'd maintained contact over the years. "She's getting married next month, and she wants Samuel to be in the wedding. She also wants to meet all of us officially, the family that raised her son." "That's wonderful," Isabel said, genuine joy in her voice. "Samuel's been excited about her letters." "There's more," Clara said, her voice growing emotional. "She's pregnant, and she and her fiancé want Samuel to be involved in his half-sister's life. They want our whole family to be part of their extended family." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "More family. Always more family," Isabel agreed softly. Later that night, as they walked through their house doing the final bedtime chexa ritual that now involved 7 rooms, Ethan marveled at the life they'd built. Diego's room was decorated with the science fair trophies he'd won, his walls covered with photos of the family's camping trips and Foundation events. Lucas's space was filled with musical instruments and sheet music, his piano visible through the open door of his practice room. Olivia's room was an explosion of art supplies and books, while little Clara's was organized with the precision of a child who remembered what it was like to have nothing. Samuel's room featured a map of the world with pins marking all the places he wanted to visit, and the twins' shared space was chaos toys everywhere, bunk beds draped with fairy lights, and a reading nook where Ethan told them stories every night. 8 children, Ethan said as they finally reached their own room. "We're going to need a bigger car. We're going to need a bigger everything," Isabel laughed. "But Ethan, can you honestly say you'd change anything?" Ethan pulled her into his arms, his hands resting on her still flat belly where their 8th child was growing. "Nothing. Not a single thing. Even the hard parts, the scary parts, the parts that almost broke us, they all led us here." "Do you ever think about that night in the rain?" Isabel asked, settling into bed beside him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd walked a different route home?" "Every day," Ethan admitted. "And every day, I'm grateful I walked exactly the route that led me to you." "I used to think that night was the worst night of my life," Isabel said softly. "I was so scared, so desperate. I thought my story was over. And now? Now I know it was the first night of my real life," she said. "Everything before that was just prologue." Ethan turned to face her in the moonlight streaming through their windows. "What do you think the next chapter holds?" "Another baby to love," Isabel said immediately, watching Diego and Lucas graduate from high school, teaching Olivia to drive, even though the thought terrifies me, walking Samuel down the aisle someday, grandchildren, growing old together in this house, we've filled with so much love. And the foundation will keep growing too, Isabel said with certainty. Clara's already talking about expanding the program nationally. We've proven that love multiplies. Now we need to spread that proof everywhere. Ethan kissed her forehead, then her lips, then her belly, where their newest miracle was developing. I love you, Isabel Carter. More than I loved you the day I married you. More than I loved you yesterday. But not as much as I'll love you tomorrow. That's impossible, Isabel protested. You can't love me more than you do right now. Watch me, Ethan said with the confidence of a man who'd learned that love had no limits. Outside their window, Seattle sparkled in the darkness, the same city where they'd found each other in the rain. But inside their home, surrounded by the children love had brought them, planning for the future love would build. Everything was warm and bright and perfect. In another part of the house, Diego was on the phone with his girlfriend, whispering about his parents' announcement and how excited he was to be a big brother again. Lucas was composing a lullaby for the new baby, his fingers moving softly over the piano keys. Olivia was in her art room, painting a picture of their family that would somehow need to include one more person. Clara was reading to little Amelia, telling her about how families grew through love, not just biology. Samuel was writing in his journal about his birth mother's upcoming wedding and how proud he was that his real family would be there. And the twins were already asleep, dreaming dreams that only children in secure, loving homes could dream. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new opportunities to choose love over fear. But tonight, the Carter family was completer, as complete as a family could be when it was built on the principle that there was always room for one more heart that needed healing. Ethan drifted off to sleep holding his wife, thinking about the scared, broken man who had walked through the rain 10 years ago. That man could never have imagined this life, this love, this legacy of hope they were building one rescued heart at a time. Love had multiplied beyond his wildest dreams. And the best part was, this was just the beginning.